Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RAMP, Real Access Motivates Progress, live Wednesday night podcast. We have so much good information for you coming to you live every week. A few housekeeping. If you would like to ask a question of any of our guests tonight, please type it in the comments and we will read them live and we will ask them right away live on podcast. So let me know, and I cannot wait to share all of this information with you tonight. Welcome my guests. Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Nice to be here.
Hey, Tina, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk to you guys this week all about clean streets and how we're going to make Providence more beautiful. So I'd like each one of you to introduce yourself, the organization you belong to, and a little bit about your organization. Matt, let's start with you.
Oh, great. Thanks. Great to be here. I'm Matt Netto. I'm the Associate State Director of Advocacy for AARP Rhode Island. And AARP Rhode Island works in many different ways in this state. I handle the advocacy, spend a lot of time working on legislation at the State House and working for the rights of and the betterment of the people 50 and older and people with disabilities here in Rhode Island. And then we have a lot of my colleagues work on great programming, such as our Gardening Master Series and our Cooking Class Series, and a lot of great, exciting programming that we have as well that we put on in the state. So it's we stay busy for sure.
Yes, AARP does so much, and those classes are absolutely amazing. I have actually joined some of them, and unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I get to join AARP in 1 month. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. Liza, why don't you go next?
Sure. Yeah, so, and I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so if my voice doesn't always sound this raspy, but right on time to come on this podcast. Okay. So my name is Liza Birkin. I'm the lead organizer of the Providence Streets Coalition, and we're a group of community nonprofits, local businesses, civic associations, schools. AARP is a wonderful member of ours, and the Rhode Island Organizing Project is, we work in community on these issues as well. So what we do is we fight for safer streets, more transportation choices, and policies that advance mobility justice here in Providence and the region around. And it's really because our streets are primarily designed for people who drive personal vehicles, and that leaves a lot of others out. So including children and youth, people who can't afford cars, people who can't drive due to disabilities, new immigrants and refugees, and people who are legally barred from driving, and those who simply choose not to drive. So we are trying to bring all of those folks together and change the way that we do street design and accommodate all road users. So no matter if you're driving, if you're taking transit, if you're biking, walking, skating, scooting, using motorized or manual wheelchairs, we are trying to design streets that accommodate you and can get you where you need to go.
Yeah, and I'm so excited. RAMP has been working with the Providence Streets Coalition for, wow, a few years now. We're going on 3 or 4 years at this point. Now, it doesn't seem like it's been that long. So we have a great partnership going on, and I absolutely love it. Marjorie, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your organization?
Hi, my name is Marjorie Waters. I'm with the Rhode Island Organizing Project as a community organizer. The lead organizer and executive director is Ray Gagne. And I just want to kind of parlay off of what Liza said, and that we see transportation as a huge issue in the state. Also, just the streets in general. One of the things that we notice is to simply cross the street. Most of the stoplights, you have to run across the street. Now, especially, there are places like Smith Street in front of the State House. It's really difficult. So what you see is, people who panic, they're mid-crossing, it starts to change. The little man puts his hand up or whatever he does, and then it sets off real panic. So one of the simple things that we're trying to accomplish is give people more time to cross the streets.
Yes. Yeah, and that is so true for people with disabilities. I mean, I'm in a motorized chair, so my chair goes a little bit faster but if somebody in a manual chair is trying to roll themselves across the street. It's very, very dangerous. And even parking, is so dangerous for so many individuals to get out and walk the rest of it. Because, a lot of people will drive to the city and then walk or bike or scoot around the city because everything is such in close quarters and parking is horrendous. So, once you get to Providence, it's better to use a scooter or your feet or your wheelchair, however you decide to get around. It's easier than trying to find another parking spot. Liza, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the main objectives that you have been working on, like right now?
Yeah. Well, I want to go back for 1 second to what Marjorie's bringing about. So let's focus on this issue of the timing of traffic signals and how long we have to cross the street. I was in urban planning school up in Boston, and I learned when they were teaching us how to create maps, right? Like how to make maps for transportation planning purposes. And they taught us that the timing that was embedded deep within the mapping software was the timing that it would take somebody to walk up a hill is actually has been measured by the Swiss Army. So it's like young men who are in an army and the average that they take to walk up a hill is actually still the measurement that we use to map things out. And so that is just like that. I feel like that describes how we've designed our cities so poorly, like kind of centering people who are young and athletic instead of people who need more time. And so
that just sounds like it works for 8 to 88. Young kids
Exactly.
can walk that fast, and older people, with their walkers and their wheelchairs, you know what I mean? That's conducive for everybody.
Exactly. So that's how just a prime example of how kind of inequities are embedded really deep in transportation planning practices. And that's what we're trying to unravel and undo.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about, what the project is that you have going on right now, because you always have a project going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Providence Streets Coalition was really formed in response to the city of Providence and the state of Rhode Island putting forward 4 transportation plans. So the city has its Great Streets Plan and its Climate Justice Plan, which has a whole section on transportation as it relates to climate change. And then the state of Rhode Island has its Bike Mobility Plan and Transit Master Plan. And the Streets Coalition was formed in order to see those plans not sit on the shelf, but actually get implemented. And so we are constantly, and within each of those 4 plans, they're like hundreds of pages long. Each of those 4 plans has dozens of capital projects, legal policy changes, and like funding mechanisms embedded within it that we're always trying to change and implement. So last night I was at the State House advocating for a greater amount of funding for the bike mobility plans and transit master plans, because even though they're adopted by the state, they're still really underfunded, especially when compared to the normal stuff we do, like highway expansion. So fighting for more funding for what they call transportation alternatives, but I like to call transportation choices. And then here in the city of Providence, the city is actually really, really rapidly moving forward with its Great Streets Plan. And so we're working on seeing about 20 more miles of what we call urban trails, which is infrastructure that's meant for people using active mobility. So any kind of, cycling, scooting, skating, rolling, jogging, moving under their own power or that of like a light electric motor. So the biggest one that we're really excited about right now is on Broad Street. So Broad Street is like the main artery of South Providence, connecting Roger Williams Park all the way to downtown. And the city is about to undergo a large scale construction project that's going to completely repave Broad Street and then redesign it with a lot more safety in mind. Shorter crosswalks, more bus islands, retimed traffic signals, and an urban trail on one side of the street, and still both parking on both sides of the street.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just love everything you do. A couple of weeks ago, I was with the new curb administrator in Providence, and about 15 other people. Ripta was involved in everything, and I rolled around in my wheelchair as everybody followed me, and we pointed out all of the stuff that needs to change. Like the parking spots they have for disabled vehicles where their ramps would come out into traffic, because that's always safe.
Right.
Or the bus centers where the platform didn't give enough room for when the bus platform came out for the wheelchair to actually get on the edge of the platform. So certain things like that, and snow removal. That's a huge,
Yes.
issue, is the snow removal part that we have going on. But Matt, how and why is AARP involved in all of this? I want everybody to understand the connection of why our organizations are working together. So can you draw that line for us?
Yeah, definitely. So a major initiative within AARP nationwide is livable communities. We believe that communities should be designed and aimed towards all people of all ages and all abilities to be able to navigate it. And it's a big part of being able to age in place. We talk about, more recently, especially since the pandemic, people are a little leery. They don't want to automatically have to go to a nursing home or an assisted living. They want to stay at home in their own community. And in order for that to happen, you need to have many things in place. It's transportation. Well, first of all, one of the big issues right now is affordable housing. So, you can have affordable housing, but what good is having great affordable housing if you don't have the neighborhood or community to be able to go to the bus stop, or to be able to go to the local community grocery store, or even to have to risk your life to cross the street because of existing infrastructure that is pretty much aimed at how fast can I get in a car from point A to point B. And that leaves out a lot of people in the communities. So it's something that affects older Rhode Islanders, but at the same time, it affects younger Rhode Islanders, disabled Rhode Islanders. It affects all people. We all need communities that are designed and made for us to thrive in, so that we aren't relying on our own personal vehicle to be able to have to drive somewhere to get somewhere to get something done that we need. So it's all about access. It's about access for everybody, and making it equal for everybody. I know the hot word these days is equity, but it is something that is 100% real, and it's something that you hear a lot about now because it was ignored for many years. So now it's receiving some spotlight. So that's where AARP fits in. It's really about making our communities that people can age in. They're made for people to age in. They're thought of. When we work on things like we have our AARP Age Friendly Network, and what that is we recruit cities and municipalities to see things through an age friendly and accessibility friendly lens. So we like to think of it as, put on a certain pair of glasses and see projects through the light of accessibility and livability. So that's really a major proponent of a lot of what we do.
Yeah, and when we talk about infrastructure, I mean, what people don't realize is infrastructure is also making businesses accessible, because there are many high rises or manors or people living in their cities, and they have to actually get on a bus instead of going across the street to get a haircut, or to go to the local restaurant that's literally across the street, because there's stairs, and those businesses are not accessible to the individuals living there. So infrastructure doesn't only mean streets, it also means the businesses being accessible. So while we're aging in place, we can go across the street and get our hair cut or go to the local restaurant. There is one manor in Providence, and I will never mention it out, but there is one manor in Providence that they literally need to get on a bus and go a mile down the street, and the closest place for them is a 7-Eleven. So that's where they go and get their food, at a 7-Eleven. When they have 3 restaurants across the street, a donut shop across the street, 2 haircut places across the street that they can't even get into, that they literally could roll across the street and access if those businesses were accessible. So infrastructure is making it for 8 to 88, so everybody can get in and live in the community. And if you open your business to accessibility, more business means more money. So it's a no-brainer, really. Marjorie, tell us how your organization got involved in all of this as well.
Well, for the past, Matt, actually a great segue. You raised so many important points that, Rhode Island Organizing Project also works on and are very near and dear to our hearts. So basically, I've been doing this for 8 years. That's when I joined Rhode Island Organizing Project. And we work under the banner of Voices for Better Health, which is a coalition that includes the Senior Agenda and the Economic Progress Institute. And they, I like to call them the legislative body and the policy body, and we're the grassroots organizer. But the relationship has been wonderful. It's tight. We work well together. We testify, we go to the State House and testify, we organize, we speak to the community, because what our job is, what my job is to raise the issues I hear in the community and help people to find a way to bring those to their state politicians, their legislators, and other things. So, it's basically having what we call house meetings and get issue cuts. What are your concerns? What are you hearing from your neighbors? And you might hear something twice in one meeting, but then you hear it 5 times in the next meeting and 10 times in the next meeting. So now you've got your issue. And it's then organizing around that to how to affect change. So that's basically in a nutshell what I do as an organizer. Some of the things we're working on, and aging in the community is probably number one. People, especially the pandemic has made it people do not want to go into nursing homes unless there is no other alternative. But I mean by that, medically and physically and other issues which require you to have that 24/7 care. So people are looking at ways to stay in their homes and communities. And there's lots of ways that the state can help through long-term services and supports, which is the at-home care that most people prefer as they age when they need care, as opposed to going into a nursing home or even assisted living. People really want to stay in their communities. They want to stay with their friends. So what we do is we raise these issues, things like funding. We have been advocating for home healthcare workers to raise their pay. They are paid pitifully. And what has happened is there's been a mass exodus, because when you can go to McDonald's and make $17 an hour, or work in a warehouse and make $18 an hour, why would you stay in an industry that is literally paying you $13.82 an hour? So we're really raising the issue and saying, these are the people that care for the people we say we love. Let's treat them like that. Let's treat them like that, which means let's not starve them. Let's make sure that this woman who leaves my house today doesn't have to work 2 more jobs just to make ends meet. So it's really an issue that I think is kind of caught fire. There are several bills right now pending to raise the wages, but there's lots of work to be done. There are plans in place that could help people with their out-of-pocket medical expenses. You know what I mean? Right now, a big chunk of people's Social Security checks are being taken because they raised the Medicare costs to $170. When you're making little, so basically there is a plan called the Medicare Savings Plan, which in fact, if we can raise the income levels off of the poverty level, will pay for that Medicare Part B, which puts like $170 back in people's pockets.
Right.
So, we presented that to the state legislature. This is a win for you guys. This is an election year. You're putting $170 back in people's pockets, in a time when it's critically needed. Housing, heating, food, you name it, has all skyrocketed, and people are really struggling to make ends meet. So let's help them do that.
I agree with you. And look at 4 different organizations here, but we're only going to make any of this happen by working together. I work with these 4, on a daily, weekly basis, because, we all have a different point of view. We all have a different community that we deal with, but we're all after the same goal. And only together are we going to make this happen. So join up with other organizations, join up with one of our organizations and help us fight to make sure that we don't want somebody flipping a burger being paid more than somebody that is flipping your grandmother or taking care of your grandmother. You know what I mean? That is the most important thing, because you know what? You're aging too. So if you don't fix it now, that caregiver may be taking care of you. So you want better health care than that. So if you don't want to do it for a loved one or for somebody else, do it for yourself, because this is going to happen to you someday. You are getting older. We all are. So, let's fix it now. So when it does happen, you're all set. Liza, I want to talk a little bit about the bus hubs and the bus transportation, because I know that's a big thing that we worked on together. So why don't you explain to everybody about, what they wanted to do and what the plan is now?
Ooh, it's a hard question. It's like, where do you start? I guess things go back further than this, but I will start with 2014, which is when the voters of Rhode Island overwhelmingly passed a bond, a $35 million bond, that called for increasing access to multimodal, to multi hubs across the state. Is that what it said? Yeah, to bus hubs throughout the state for $35 million. And, in the packaging of that bond and kind of the advertising and the community organizing that it took to get it passed, it was really about bringing the bus hub closer to the train station and uniting those two transit points together. But it wasn't specific in the language of the bond. And over the past, how many years is it now? Since 2014, 8, there's been probably as many plans, and the state and RIPTA and the city have basically, until now, sort of been unable to come up with a plan of how to spend that money. And so it's been really difficult. And basically Kennedy Plaza is like this political football that is the space that is kind of used by a lot of different stakeholders, certainly transit, certainly the folks who spend time in the park in Burnside Park. I gather there once a month with 250 bicyclists to go on a ride together. People use it for all sorts of reasons. It's the center of the city, the very, very center of the city, the place where people are trying to go. We know that it's also a place where a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness gather, and a lot of people who are experiencing substance use disorder are gathering. And all of this, there's basically just interlocking complexities and people fighting over what they want Kennedy Plaza to be. And my job is to make our transit system better for everyone who uses it. And so the latest, in July 2020, the latest plan, which was really the worst plan that the state came out with, would have divided the bus hub at Kennedy Plaza into 3 separate stations. They called them mini hubs. Let's just call it a bus station. And that would have been at the train station, and like 2 at separate ends of Kennedy Plaza, and 1 in the Jewelry District. And the state of Rhode Island really was trying to do that with 0 community input, 0 thought to the transit experience, 0 thought to how it was going to affect riders. They're really just trying to get riders out of Kennedy Plaza as quickly as possible. And so me and everyone else on this call spent 2 years fighting them as hard as we could to go back to the drawing board and say, no, that's not at all okay with transit riders. You need to consult us and make sure that whatever we build with this bond money that the voters voted for actually improves the transit experience. I'll hand it over to Marjorie to keep going. It's a long story.
Yes, it is. So no, we got involved really with the no fare bus pass was, our entry into this whole transportation thing when they were trying to to terminate that program, and we fought very hard. And that's when we really got engaged with the communities and understood the transportation issues, from the people that use the bus every day, that the bus is their sole means of transportation. They're not using it for convenience, they're using it out of because it is necessary. So with that, we stayed, we kept our fingers in the pie, so to speak, and stayed in the transportation issue. And, look, finally, the no fare bus pass got funded, so we could kind of breathe a sigh of relief. And then this, the new issue was the whole Kennedy Plaza issue. There are lots of emotions around this whole issue. To move it, people want to make sure that it's equitable, that it considers all parties involved, that it's accessible, that this is a really, I have kind of harped on traffic studies because that's a big concern of mine. Is it going to impede vehicular traffic, because then you're going to make people mad? But also, if it's so congested that it makes it difficult for people to get around on foot or other mobility devices, then that's a dangerous situation. So as of yet, we haven't seen those plans, which makes me a little nervous. But the other push that we're doing is, it's wonderful to have this new building, but let's talk about service in Rhode Island. I live in Woonsocket, and I can't get to Providence from here easily. It is a saga. So in addition to pushing for a new terminal, I'm hoping, and we're pushing for them to take a look at the transportation system throughout the state. I saw something recently that said 80% of the people are within 10 minutes, of a bus stop, but woe be to the other 20% who may be miles away from a bus stop. And that needs to change. You know what I mean? We need to modernize what the bus service looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is I live out in Burrville. We can't even use the ride program because we're not 3/4 of a mile from anything. We don't even have a fast food restaurant out here. So, I mean, we are that far in the boondocks out here. That some of this money should be, we have one wheelchair accessible taxi in this entire state for outsiders coming in to visit our beautiful state and our oceans. We have one accessible taxi in the entire state. That's what some of this money needs to be addressed to, so that way people can enjoy and come and travel and visit all of our, beautiful landscape. Matt, what are some of the big projects that AARP has going on right now that that they're working on that ties into all of this?
Yeah, so one issue that we've picked up this year is really affordable housing, accessible housing. And one of the things that AARP has worked on for 22 years now are accessory dwelling units. Some people know them as in-law apartments. So back in 2017, a bill was passed in the state that gave people the right to build an accessory dwelling unit. However, when they went to do so at the municipal level, they ran into so many permit fees and zoning laws that it made it practically impossible. So we are revisiting that. We have we have companion bills. They're just about companion bills. There's one line off that have been introduced. Representative Ackerman in the House has put in House Bill 7942. And Senator Coleman has put in Senate Bill 2623 sub A. And what it would do is it increases utilization and access to accessory dwelling units. It sets statewide standards that municipalities would follow when governing them and allowing them. And, the really aim for it is everyone wants to, like we talked about, people talk about want to stay in their community, aging in place. And it's horrific to think that someone could work their whole life for their home and get it exactly the way they want it. And then the second they hit a mobility issue where they can't take care of the house the way they need to, they can't take the trash out. Maybe they're having trouble cooking, they're having health issues, or with the way living expenses are going and property taxes and everything else, a lot of older couples are on fixed incomes, or older individuals on fixed incomes, and they can't keep up with the increase. So an accessory dwelling unit, and being able to rent it to, let's say, a caregiver who could help you out with household tasks, which would then allow you to stay in your home. Or maybe a young professional, maybe one of these direct care workers we're talking about that get paid so unfairly, and they're looking for an affordable place to stay, and they have a specific skill set to help an older person who may need help staying at their home. So it's a win-win on both sides. So that's one issue that we are working on actively right now. Another one, which Marjorie had mentioned, is the direct care work staff, CNAs, nursing home staff, direct care home staff, home care staff. And there are actually two bills being heard tomorrow in the Senate Finance. You got Senate Bill 2200 and Senate Bill 2311 put forth, introduced by Senator DePalma, which would set rate reviews for Medicaid, with the goal of getting our reimbursement rates to be competitive with Massachusetts and Connecticut, so we can pay our employees a competitive wage and keep them here in the state. Because until we do that, we're going to be training them to go benefit people in Connecticut and Massachusetts, where they're going to get paid more. And it's really it's a sad state right now when it comes to that stuff. So it all ties in together, as I talked about before. You know, if you're going to age in place, you need the home services, you need the transportation, you need the supports at home. And it all needs to come together to fit to be a livable community.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things I always go back for, I'm a broken record, the physical accessibility piece, because, you know, we're using they want to use the Superman building and this other apartment complex that, you know, they just opened up. Well, anybody in a wheelchair or a mobility device shouldn't be off the first floor, because what is the first thing that's going to go down in an emergency but the elevator? So now the place that you're supposed to feel the most safe and secure is your home. You know that's the place you're going to die in, because if you're on the 10th, 11th, or 12th floor, they're going to take care of all of the people that are running down the stairs and trying to get out. They're not going to be able to even get anywhere near you if that building is on fire. So, you know, we need to think about putting those physical accessibility apartments on the first level where somebody can get themselves out, or where they know where they are to be able to get them out. So affordable housing is great, but if you're not doing the physical accountability piece for the 45% of Americans and Rhode Islanders right now that are using a mobility device, what people don't realize is the disability community is 26% with 1 in 4, but the aging population at that 60 and older, we're saying that 45% of those identify with using a mobility device, either temporarily or permanently. But because they're not on SSDI and not counted as disabled, they're getting skewed out of the numbers. So no one's getting the right amount of the physical accessibility that we need in the state. And I know AARP was a huge champion with us for the home modification grants that work for homes and renters. If you want to talk a little bit about that, Matt.
Yeah, that is an amazing program. That's actually something we've been advocating this year. Last year, it got codified into law, so we don't have to keep fighting to keep it alive any longer. It's there in law, so that's a good thing. But that program, which offers matching grants to people to get home modifications, to be able to stay in their home, whether it's a ramp or bathroom modifications, or it could even be something like the Ring doorbells, video doorbells, special locks for people with dementia, and other memory-related issues. What they do is they match the grants. It's a matching grant program up to $4,000. The budget's only $500,000 a year. I can tell you, I got a word about 3 weeks ago from Bob Cooper at the Governor's Commission on Disabilities that the money's gone. We've already spent $500,000 this year. It happens every single year. We're running out of money about 3/4 of the way through the year. That program, one of the most incredible stats I've heard this year is about that program. Since it started, everyone that's been granted an award through that program, the Governor's Commission on Disabilities has reached out to their healthcare provider and asked them, without these modifications, would they be able to stay at home? What we learned was since it started, 198 people have been kept out of nursing homes and assisted living
because of that program, which results in an annual savings of $5.7 million in the Medicaid rolls a year. So we need more money for that program, double it, because the more we can have accessible housing, the better it is for everybody. And I will add this as well. We talk about building all of this new housing. It needs to be done with universal design in mind.
Absolutely.
We need to be proactive about this and build houses to specs that are built for people with disabilities, that are built for people that are aging and have different needs. So it's, you know, it's something we're actively working on. We're very passionate about it. As you can tell, I have a lot to say on this issue.
Well, I mean, it's so true, because they just built those 60 affordable housing units in Providence. Not one is physically accessible. Then they did those 17 other apartments. Again, not one of those apartments, using state and federal money completely against the ADA. Not one apartment is physically accessible. So you're leaving out the population. Renters can use that home modification grant to the only aspect that they have is to maintain it for 10 years. I sit as vice chair on the Governor Commission on Disability. So I'm actively involved in this grant. This grant is hugely responsible. And the other thing that this grant will cover is generators. For somebody like me who's in a motorized wheelchair, who has oxygen in my house, and who needs, you know what I mean, power all the time. Because I mean, people say, oh, you only lose power for an hour or two. That's great. You go for an hour or two without oxygen and you tell me how you feel. You know what I mean? So it's not a want, it's a need. It's that important. So we do need to fund more money for that, because, and Rhode Island is a champion in this. Rhode Island is one of the only states, if not the only state, that it's a grant program, that it's not where you have to pay it back. It's a grant program to help you afford this. Marjorie, do you do anything with this grant on your end?
We do more referrals for people, because we do get calls from folks who are, as Matt described so well, are trying to stay in their homes, are struggling to stay in their homes and trying to figure out ways to do that. But I think what we're hearing here, there is a lack of real planning. You know what I mean? To look at these apartments they're putting up there, who are they for? Where is the need? Who's going to be living there? And that's where I think that we're failing, that we're not really building these apartments with a grand plan. You know, one of the things I've heard quite a bit is, I'll go visit, you know, especially, you know, the high rises of subsidized housing, and people have made the decision to live there because it was close to things. There were grocery stores and there was a bus stop right outside. Well, in the 5 or 6 years, maybe 7 years that they've been there, maybe a decade, everything has changed. The grocery stores have closed. The bus stop is no longer there. Now they're living in basically an area that's a food desert. So when they built these apartments knowing that seniors and disabled folks were going in there, why didn't they get long-term commitments from those type of services like supermarkets to stay in that area? Because then you have people that are oftentimes are forced to move because of those issues.
It's so true. I mean, we RAMP have just donated a couple of weeks ago 181 walkers, wheelchairs, and canes to those experiencing homelessness, because the shelters are in bottom basements of churches, which is not accessible. They can't stay with their partner that they need, because our shelters are not couple or family oriented for the most part, and they're not wheelchair accessible. You know, so that's a huge problem. Figure it, 181 walkers, wheelchairs, and canes, because these people cannot go into an apartment building, cannot find a home, cannot view a home, because they can't get in to see it. They can't fill out the application to even, you know, get there because of their experience. Liza, you must have seen some of this experiences out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, my partner is visually disabled, so he can't drive. And so I've definitely witnessed him and he uses the ride to get around. But going back to the planning for a moment, I do know that the city of Providence is about to start the process to update its comprehensive plan. So I'm learning so much from you all tonight about about these issues, and so much of it falls under zoning. And I think that we need to be really strong together and talk about how we can update the zoning to require accessible apartments on the first floor of all new apartment buildings. Like, that's something that we could be advocating for at the city level, if not the whole state. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so important to think they're not bringing the right people to the table. You know, everybody can have an idea, but there could be the wheelchair symbol accessible on any door. But I'll tell you how many doors that symbol is there that I can't get my wheelchair in. Or they'll tell me their bathroom is accessible, and I'll be like, no, come with me and I will show you how this bathroom is not accessible, because that symbol does not make it accessible. What makes it accessible is actually being usable for the user. So you can have all of the right measurements in the wrong order, that does not make those places accessible. Or how many buildings do you go into in Providence? Take the CIC building in Providence. They have 2 people that sit at the doorway for people who come in, and I have asked them straight out, do you take check of where the wheelchair or mobility device users are in this building? They're like, no, why should we? I said, because you'll be the first ones out to the fire truck. Wouldn't it be nice to say to the firemen, I have 2 wheelchairs on the 2nd floor in the front of the building, a wheelchair on the 3rd floor in the back of the building, so that somebody could go and get them out? Like, we need a plan to make sure that people are being known where they are to get them out. And I know we're all advocating for the same thing, but we all need to know what the problems is and what we're advocating for. Matt, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, you just brought up something that gave me a memory of one of the biggest issues when I first realized these issues. Is I used to be a state director for a nonprofit here in the state that worked for socialization programs for young children with disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we were at one hotel. We were having a large dance for all the kids from across the state, and the fire alarm went off. Someone burnt a chicken parm in the kitchen and shut down the elevators. And we had 3 kids, teenagers in wheelchairs on the 2nd floor of this hotel, and looked at the fire department and said, how are we getting them out of here? Like, we can't, what are we going to do? And we end up having to carry them with the wheelchairs down the fire escapes as far as we could go until we got clearance. That's how well these things are thought through. And that was just for a burnt chicken parm. That is not like a life-threatening situation, but even having to evacuate over a simple thing becomes a very stressful and impossible situation because of the way things are planned, because they're not seen through the accessibility lens.
Yeah. I mean, I go and stay at a hotel and they'll say, oh, your room is on the 9th floor. I'm like, no, it's not. They're like, well, that's where the accessible rooms are. I'm like, yeah, that's great. If there's a fire, how are you getting me down the stairs on my 350-pound chair that I'm not in? That's just my chair. That doesn't count me too. How does the fire department know where I am? No, you're putting me on the 1st floor, whether it's an accessible room or not. I need to get myself out. You know, and that's where the thought isn't there. They'll put all the accessible rooms on the high floor. Well, I don't need a high floor. I want the 1st floor. You know what I mean? I want to be able to get myself out. But as we're nearing the end of the hour, I want to make sure that you all give out your contact information and how people can get involved. So we're going to start with Marjorie. Marjorie, give out your website and contact information. So if people want to join your organization, they know how to.
Hi. Well, we don't have an official website, but we do have a Twitter page, and we're at RIUP, RI on Twitter. Our phone number is 401-351-5577. Join us, call us, let us know what's going on in your community, and hopefully we can join together and help.
So that is great. Liza, give out your information so people know how to contact you.
Sure thing. It's our website is pvdstreets.org, and my email is Liza, Liza, at ourstreetspvd.org. We're on Instagram at Providence Streets, Twitter at PVD Streets, Facebook as Providence Streets Coalition. Would love to have you join the fight.
And Matt, you have your little coworker over there with you, I see.
Oh,
Give
yes.
us your information.
Perfect. Yes. No, thank you. It's my little one's second birthday. So happy birthday to Avery. This is
Happy
Natalie.
birthday, Avery.
So we AARP AARP.org/Rhode Island or RI. You can find us on Facebook, AARP Rhode Island, Twitter, AARP Rhode Island. If you're looking to keep up with more advocacy stuff and legislative stuff, you can just Google Neto's Notes. My brilliant communications director started this little blog for me, which I'm learning to utilize. So we put all of our testimony there and a lot of really cool links and stuff there. So that's it. And if you want to talk to me specifically about an issue, a bill, a concern, you can reach me at 401-834-0524. 401-834-0524.
And if you missed any of that and you don't remember, they are not only my colleagues, they're also my friends. So just message RAMP and I will put you in touch with who you need to be in touch with. And I will make sure I make the connection because I am a people connector. I got rid of my CEO title and decided to call myself the people connector because that's what I do. I connect all the right people together. So just message RAMP. Lastly, I want all of you to go around and tell everybody why they need to get involved and why they need to have their voice heard. Liza, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Okay. Why we need to get involved? Well, like we need more safety, more equity, and more sustainability on our streets, period.
Perfect. Marjorie, why should everybody get involved and volunteer?
Because if we have the good fortune to age, we all need help to understand what services and supports are available for us to do that safely in our communities.
Matt, give us your reason.
So as a lobbyist, I'm going to take the advocacy route on this one and say, we elect these people to represent us, which means they need to hear our opinion. They need to hear our voice. People have no idea how much your letter or your testimony can influence a bill and the progress it makes. They look for real people's stories. They don't want to hear from lobbyists like me. They want to hear from the people in the communities. And those are the voices that really make a difference. So if you see something you don't like, say something. Because if you don't, it's probably not going to change.
And my plea to all of that is you can't complain about it if you don't help the process. We're all aging. God bless us all. We are all aging. And the other thing is we can't help what life hits us. I ended up in a wheelchair in 5 minutes, completely not planned. I mean, nobody plans to end up in a wheelchair, but I ended up in a wheelchair in 5 minutes. So if your life changes or your loved one's life changes, don't you want the world accessible for them and to have as many services as absolutely possible for them? So that is my plea for all of you. Matt, give out AARP's website one more time quickly.
AARP.org/Rhode Island.
Liza?
PVDstreets.org.
Marjorie?
RIAP_RI on Twitter.
Perfect. So make sure you are reaching out, make sure you are volunteering. And again, make sure that you are getting involved because again, you cannot complain and you have no right to say anything if you don't vote, if you don't testify, and if you don't stand up for your community, because you're just letting the problem go on. You can do it in a very positive way. I don't think anybody here on this call has ever heard me be anything but positive. So you can do this in the most positive, helpful way out there. You do not need to be mean or vulgar or, yell and scream about it because that's going to get you nowhere. It's the positive advocacy and it's working together with other organizations and other people that's going to make the change that we all need. I am so blessed to have each and one of you on this show tonight to get out all of this information. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here on RAMP tonight. I know I'll be working with all of you, like I said, going forward like we do now. So thank you all so much for being a part of this show this evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Tina. Your energy and advocacy you're such a role model for me in my organizing. So thank you.
Thank you so much,
thank you,
Tina.
sir.
People just need
you're
to lift
welcome.
up their voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to invite everybody back here next Wednesday night. Next Wednesday night, we have a great show for all of you. We are going to be talking to United Spinal, and I have connected with them this year and being a big part of their advocacy and their role on the Capitol in June, on June 14th. So that's a big organization. It's a national organization like my organization. So join us next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, same time, same channel. You know where to find us. And as I always say, don't just sit there, make a difference. Good night, everybody, and we'll see you next Wednesday.